everyone, and welcome to the Friday, March 26th, 2021 edition of On Iowa Politics. This week on the podcast, SGOTUS visits Iowa to promote the federal pandemic relief package. The rhetoric heats up in Iowa's 2nd District, and 2024 is here. Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Murphy, the Des Moines Bureau Chief for Lee Enterprises, and that last thought made me vomit a little. With me today are Amie Rivers of the Waterloo-Cedar Courier. Good morning, Amie.
Good morning, Erin. Me too.
And Gazette columnist Todd Dorman. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning, and I for one, welcome our new cast of overlords. So,
well, at least one of us does.
Happy to see them.
As a reminder, you can subscribe to the On Iowa Politics on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. First up this week, SGOTUS, the second gentleman of the U.S., for all of you acronym lovers out there, visited Iowa this week as the Biden administration looked to bolster public support for the Democrat-designed federal COVID-19 relief package. Douglas Emhoff, the husband of Vice President Kamala Harris, toured a Des Moines food bank and learned about food security issues. He was joined at the event by Tom Vilsack, the second tour federal ag secretary and former Iowa governor, as well as Congresswoman Cindy Axne. Todd, I covered the event itself. It was fairly straightforward and, dare I say, humdrum. What's more interesting to me is the very existence of this event, and it's been part of a series that the White House has put on to engage the public on the pandemic relief package. Apparently, it wasn't enough to send $1,400 direct checks to most U.S. adults. They feel they need to bolster support for that even further. What do you make of this little tour, events like this? Is this a smart move by the administration? Was it necessary?
Well, first, I feel bad for the Solicitor General because I don't think he or she has an acronym anymore. Since we have second gentleman, so that's got to be painful for them. Because when that press release came out, that was the first thing I thought of, and I'm like, oh, second gentleman. I'm like, why would the Solicitor General be coming here? Anyway, so yeah, it's it is necessary to sell your big stuff. I mean, I think we all remember that there was a lot of criticism of the Obama administration for basically not doing enough to sell the Affordable Care Act, and that allowed its critics to sort of define it before the administration could, and led to lots of political problems and wave elections and such. So you need to get out there and explain to people what this does. I think I read some comments by Senator Ernst. I'm not sure, maybe it was one of your stories or somewhere, that she was basically saying once people spend the $1,400, they're gonna only remember all of the stuff that was in this that wasn't as popular, and the blue state bailouts and all of those things. So I think you need to sort of get out ahead of that. And I think that's what the Biden administration is trying to do, is to show people that, there is more to this than the $1,400 checks. It's got components that, would probably be popular if people knew about them. And that's what they're emphasizing. So that makes sense.
Yeah, there definitely is a political PR campaign happening around this. And Amie, Todd just noted it. He's exactly right. I asked Senator Ernst a little while back why she thinks Republicans feel so strongly that the relief package is a winning political issue for them. And again, Todd is exactly right. She said because she believes that once people spend those stimulus checks, they'll eventually forget about that and only remember that taxpayers are left to pay the bill for everything else that's in there. That's where I read it. Yeah. There you go.
You read it in the script.
I totally forgot.
That's all right.
It was late last night.
Hey, you read it. It's not important to me that it was my byline or not.
I'm just trying to sabotage this whole thing. So go ahead.
I'll get you back later. It's fine.
Well, but Amie, what do you think of that? Are Republicans going to be able to make this a winning issue for them? I mean, do you think? I guess who do you suspect that voters will more fondly remember for the stimulus? The Democrats who voted for it, or the Republicans who voted against it?
Well, I mean, it's a couple years away, right? But I mean, the polling has been pretty consistent. So like even before the bill was passed, you saw something like a little over 70% of people supported it. Now, obviously, this was kind of split by political party too. The majority of Democrats supported it, while only about half Republicans did. But that's still continued. So even now with the law being passed, you're still seeing those numbers. They really haven't measurably moved as of the last Politico Morning Consult poll that was done a week or two ago. So yeah, it's not really moved the needle a lot. I think it would definitely have to be like a major messaging overhaul for the Republicans to really sort of change people's minds. But I think just with time too, that will also like soften it. Like you'll forget about, how much that money meant to you, 2 years down the road. So it's still possible that,
yeah. And that's such a good point that it's
take it back.
Yeah, that's such a good point that it's a couple of years down the road. And so maybe to Republicans' line of thinking and what Senator Ernst says, maybe it's just more of a base thing anyways. Because when you listen to what Republicans criticize about the bill, and Todd mentioned the biggest one you hear a lot is the whole blue states bailout thing, is obviously that's nothing that's moving middle of the road type voters. That's a base, rallying cry. So maybe that's essentially what it is for Republicans is they're betting it's not going to be a huge campaign issue in a year or so ago from now for the midterm, and but it could be something that fires up the base. So what do you think of that, Todd?
Well, yeah, I think that's always the main focus, is to sort of motivate those folks, and Republicans always sort of have an edge when it comes to sort of when there's big spending passed, and they can they have a history of sort of railing against big spending, and well at least especially when they don't have the White House. the deficit concerns are less notable when their guys in charge. But yeah, I think for Biden though, I mean this probably the biggest thing about this is that he promised to do this and he kept his promise, and so as always the party in power at the White House braces for losses in the midterms. And I think, the more things they can accomplish that they've promised, the more, the better argument they'll make that their party has done a good job in charge. So I think it's imperative that they get this stuff done. And that's why we're going to see now this pressure building to end the filibuster, because with that in the way, they're going to be hard pressed to get these big initiatives done. So, and the president sort of at his press conference indicated that maybe he was open to some sort of changes in that, which was news. Every time he talks about it, it's news, because at first he was against changing it. So that's going to be the next act of this, is how far are they willing to go to get stuff passed?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's going to be a fascinating political kind of, I don't know if battle is the right word, but just to kind of see how that unfolds. We'll definitely talk about that one on a future episode. Moving on this week, Republicans turned the rhetoric up to 11 on Democrat Rita Hart's challenge in Iowa's 2nd congressional district election results. You all know the story by now, but for any listeners out there who just emerged from a coma, real quickly here, Republican Marionette Miller Meeks won by just 6 votes out of nearly 400,000. And Hart is challenging those results in the Democrat-controlled U.S. House because her campaign believes roughly 24 ballots were legally cast but not counted. Republicans accused Hart, the campaign, of using the Democrats' House majority to change the election's outcome, saying they should have gone through state legal processes first, while Hart's campaign says the House was the only proper avenue to resolve the uncounted ballots, that the state's recount procedures are insufficient. Now that we're caught up, Todd, Republicans have really been putting on the full court press here, speaking of PR political campaigns. The last week or two, press conferences, press releases, all over social media. The Hart campaign did finally kind of respond this week. Whether that GOP full court press is working or not, or maybe just some Democrats were uneasy with the whole thing regardless, there have been a few congressional Democrats who have expressed unease with the Hart campaign's chosen route here. What's your gut tell you, Todd? Do you believe House Democrats will vote to reverse the 2nd district election results?
Well, I think their hearts are with Rita Hart, not to make a pun, but but I think in the end, this is going to be a political calculation, not a vote calculation. And I'm starting to get a feeling this week reading, what was said. And I think I read that the speaker was going to have something to say about this on Monday. Was there something that had been reported? I'm beginning to believe that the calculation will be saving this one House seat is not worth the grief it's going to receive politically, and also how it's going to, sort of spark these charges of hypocrisy that you're telling Republicans they're supposed to, stop talking about a stolen election while you're, investigating an election with the possibility of overturning the results. So I think in the end they may just dispatch this and leave well enough alone. But I could be wrong. I mean, it is a narrow majority, and this could be an important seat. But I think, the other calculation is that overturning it and taking the seat is going to make it hard to hold it anyway. So, if you abandon this, then maybe you have a chance to flip that next time in a fairly competitive district. So I think they're going to cut bait.
Yeah, let me put you on the spot here with another crystal ball question, Todd. That makes me think. So let's say that you're right, and whatever does or doesn't happen procedurally, that Marionette Miller Meeks stays in the seat and fills out the term. Can Rita Hart run for that office again? Can she run in that race again, given what she's tried to do here in these past few weeks, or does that put her in a tough spot? Gives the Miller Meeks campaign a big bludgeon right away to start out that campaign.
Yeah, it puts her in a tough spot. I mean, she's going to be inundated with, attack ads pointing out that she and Nancy Pelosi tried to steal the seat, or I mean, that may not be accurate in the end, but accuracy, what's that got to do with campaign ads? So I think she probably is not who you want to send out there next time, but I mean, she can run. It remains a free country at this hour, so she can, but they might want to think about a different challenger, because I mean, Marionette Miller Meeks won by 6 votes, so you think maybe you've got a shot. So
6 votes. I keep coming back to I can't remember where I read this, so forgive me for the lack of citation, but someone had reported that there were, I don't know, X thousand votes out of Johnson County that undervoted, that voted for Biden but didn't fill in the second,
like 3,000 some.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just a huge number, just a remarkable. I mean, you want to talk about Democrats kicking themselves.
You might want to do some campus outreach next time.
Jeez. All right. Well, that was an election that happened roughly 5 months ago. We're going to finish this week by talking about another election that won't happen for another 34 months. The 2024 presidential primary and Iowa's caucuses, assuming they're still first in the nation and relevant in any way. C-SPAN is kicking off its Road to the White House 2024 series today. We're recording this podcast on Friday morning. So there's your depressing thought for the day. Other than Todd, who's handling this so much better than Amie and I are. So the C-SPAN's kicking it off by covering former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who's making a visit to Iowa. He actually spoke, probably done, if I'm reading my watch correctly already, Friday morning, spoke to a suburban Des Moines conservative group, and he's also reportedly hosting a fundraiser for 1st District Congresswoman Ashley Hinson. So, first of all, please congratulate me at this moment for withholding my sobs at the thought of another presidential campaign already underway. But sure enough, and in C-SPAN's defense, it's not just Pompeo. The Scott brothers, South Carolina U.S. Senator Tim Scott and Florida U.S. Senator Rick Scott, yes, that was a joke, they're not really brothers, are both headed to Iowa within the next month. So the campaign trail is real. It is already happening. So Todd, please kill me. I don't have a question for you. Just please kill me. No, okay, fine. I'll ask a question. So what's interesting about this on the Republican side is the specter of former President Donald Trump, obviously. There was a poll that came out early this past week that said 60% of Iowa Republicans said they would vote for Donald Trump if he was in the Republican primary. So I guess until Trump says one way or another what he's going to do, people like Pompeo, the Scotts, Tom Cotton, Nikki Haley, et cetera, I guess they have to come here to at least start laying the groundwork. Is that what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, the prospect of a potential Scott ticket has got to have people pretty excited.
Great Scott.
Scott squared. Scott squared. Yeah, I mean that's what you do. Is you start coming to Iowa and meeting people and making connections with the various kingmakers and all of that. And yeah, you can do that. A lot of, even if you're waiting for Trump to decide, because I mean you might as well, because who knows what he'll decide and when and whether that decision will stick, or he's unpredictable. So yeah, you come to Iowa and most of these guys are delivering, these candidates are delivering messages that are fairly consistent with sort of the Trump government agenda. So it's not like they're going to offend Trump necessarily by coming to Iowa, but yeah, I mean this is what you do, and you do it early, and yeah, it's sort of ridiculous how early it is, but that's the model, especially if Trump doesn't decide to run again, that it looks like it's going to be a really crowded, caucus primary. I think Pompeo actually called it the first in the nation primary this morning, or the Iowa primary, at his event.
I heard that too.
He's going to have to overcome that initial gaffe.
First stumble right out of the gate.
I mean, it's not as bad as calling the Hawkeyes the Buckeyes, but I mean, it's not great.
Well, Todd, we'll ask this question on this podcast probably 5 million times between now and 2023. But if Trump does run, does he clear the field, or do you think he'll still get people like, some of these big names like Pompeo, Tom Cotton, Nikki Haley, do you think they would run in a primary with Donald Trump? Against, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of, variables, some unforeseen, whether, he eventually is under criminal indictment in New York or something like that. But all things remaining constant, I would say, yeah, he would probably clear the field, because, I mean, you've got this huge swath of the electorate that believes, he should still be president now. So the fact that they believe it was stolen from him is going to make them motivated to put him back up. But yeah, like I say, he's an older guy, so there's the health issue, and there's all sorts of things that could change. But yeah, like I say, given current factors, I think he probably would be the clear front runner.
Yeah. On the other side, Amie, President Joe Biden made a little news this week during his first press conference, when he said he intends to run for re-election. He said that could change, but he said that his intention to run for re-election. And that was noteworthy only because, some of the political sphere had speculated that maybe he would only serve one term, then turn over the reins to his vice president, Kamala Harris, or maybe an open primary, depending on how that unfolded. Did his declaration surprise you, Amie?
No, what I've been reading about is I think he needs to really make that declaration that he's going to run again, because if he doesn't, he becomes a lame duck president, right? And then his agenda is, could be lost in there and things like that. He very well could be wanting to run for re-election. But I think I've seen enough articles that are anonymously sourcing Democrats that say he's not going to run for a second term, that I think maybe it is just, let me put it out there and say it's possible that I'm going to run. And then if he pulls it back later, then he'll sort of lose that whole 3 years of lame duckness that he would otherwise have. Yeah. So it's probably a good strategy for him to put out there. Whether or not he's going to run again is an open question, probably.
We'll give you a chance, Todd, to jump in on that same question.
Well, it's one thing that you can say that they can't fact check, because we don't know yet. Yeah, I mean, Amy's right. You can't come in a couple of months and say you're not going to run again. I mean, you have to basically leave the door open and let your congressional opponents and critics wonder whether you are a lame duck and whether they can just kind of run out the clock or whether you're intending to run again. I think part of it will depend on what he gets accomplished. If he gets a lot of his goals accomplished somehow, maybe he'll just say, there, I did what I wanted to do, and now I'm gonna, head back to Delaware. But yeah, I mean, I think Amy's right that odds are maybe against it among the folks that know, but it's just if Trump runs again, then do you make the calculation that once again that Biden is probably the best candidate to sort of throw out against him, or do you conclude that Kamala Harris would be better? And if Biden doesn't run, does the field clear for Kamala, or do a bunch of Democrats get in and try to run anyway? So yeah, those are all big questions we can't answer.
Yeah. So speaking of that press conference, and full disclosure here for our listeners, we usually kind of game plan what topics we're going to talk about. And I didn't mention this one, so I'm putting our folks on the spot here, but I'm curious. The press corps caught a lot of heat about the topics that were covered in President Biden's first press conference the other day. Speaking of this, he got asked this question plus multiple follow-ups on it, but there were no questions about the pandemic, no questions about gun control. I was wondering if first of all, did you see or consume the proceedings of the press conference, and if you had any reaction to the topics that were covered, and did the White House press corps kind of drop the ball on stuff they could have or maybe even should have been asking about? Todd, how about you?
Yeah, I think the criticism was fair. I mean, we had this people clamoring for weeks for him to have his first press conference, and then we get to that press conference finally, and the news is that says he's going to run for a second term, which we're I don't know how many days we're into the first term, 60. So yeah, I mean, if you took 10 people off the street and asked them, would have come up, and I think COVID probably would have, and he didn't get any questions about that, and I don't think the economy came up too much. So I think there are just we've all been guilty of it at one point or another, where you go into a press conference and you're like, I want to ask a question that's going to make news, not a question that's going to provide greater understanding to the electorate, and so that's often what happens is you get a situation like that where a political sort of procedural story trumps what a more substantive issue.
Yeah. Amie, how about you? Were you able to tune in at all to the press conference?
I wasn't, but I was sort of reading some analysis after the fact, and I did think it was notable that he wasn't asked at all about coronavirus. And he even brought it up. I mean, he was the one who said he was setting a new goal of having 200 million vaccine doses in his first 100 days instead of 100 million. That would have sort of been the opening for reporters to be like, oh yeah, I should ask about that. and still no one did. So it's not for lack of questions. I mean, there's still questions about the vaccine rollout, about how come states aren't getting as much as they were going to get, about whether there will still be testing available, how hospitals are going to get supplies. Is the national stockpile going to be built back up, and with what money, and how are we going to do it better this time? Hopefully, we're able to maybe reassess, and by we, I mean, report can reassess and sort of remember to ask those questions. Like we're not out of the pandemic, and his administration, I think, should still have to, keep that in mind and be questioned on that.
Yeah. Send Amie to the White House right away.
Send me to the White House.
Well, yeah, it also plays into the critics of the press on the right who, the former president would say, after this election, or once I'm gone, you won't even ask about COVID anymore. Well, and here's the first press conference, and it's like, right. they didn't ask the president about COVID. It's sometimes the level of self-parody is troubling.
Unfortunate. And like I said, the other one that amazed me was no questions about gun regulations, given we're fresh off of 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Discussion is being had. And I mean, we're talking about possible legislation again. It's not like it's some ethereal discussion. There's very real legislative possibilities here, and then that doesn't come up either.
Back-to-back news stories recently.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Fortunately, us here on the On Iowa Politics podcast all ask the perfect questions at the exact right time in all press conferences, so you can feel good about that. On that note, that's it for this week's podcast. We thank you all for listening, and we hope it was worth your time. If you like the show, subscribe and tell a friend. You can send fan mail to oniowapolitics@gmail.com. And don't forget the work of everyone you heard today and those who couldn't join us as well can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, the Waterloo-Cedar Falls Courier, Sioux City Journal, Mason City Globe Gazette, Muscatine Journal, Council Bluffs Daily Non-Pareil, and the Cedar Rapids Gazette. I'm going to start asking for credits music over those as I For Amie, Todd, and our producer, Stephen, I'm Erin Murphy. Thanks for listening.